Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Director. Good to see you.
Same.
Thanks for coming. I always enjoy your testimony. When I look for a common thread running throughout your testimony, and I look at your agency's behavior, one of the common threads I see is that, and I'm not going to ask you to comment on this, is that in your judgment, some companies in America are making too much money. Now, when you analyze their financial statements, do you not?
Sure.
Do you distinguish between revenue and earnings when you analyze a financial statement?
Well, sure. We look at all things, and I would say that we don't think of too much
What's the difference between
money.
revenue and earnings?
Well, these are all used colloquially. Sometimes those are similar. In GAAP accounting, which is what most U.S. companies use.
Don't tell me about GAAP. Just tell me your understanding of the difference between revenue and earnings.
Well, I can share with you revenue and net income. So those are the two factors that when you say are on financial statements.
Earnings is another word for net income.
Well, earnings can be used for many different things, but in generally accepted accounting principles, net income is what all of our banks are really using.
Okay. Well, revenue is before expenses, and earnings, net income, is after expenses. Is that
No, I think like when people go to work, they say, my earnings were this. I mean, that's their salary. So I think we tend to look
No,
at
I'm not
accounting
talking.
definitions.
They may say that, but when you analyze a financial statement, you look at expenses, don't you? You don't just equate revenue with earnings, do you?
Oh, totally. And I think your
Okay,
suggestion that we think companies are too profitable, we think about competition.
I understand.
What are the options people
Well,
have
here's
in
what
order to...
here's what is confusing me. We all know, unless you were playing Frisbee in the quad during Econ 101 or Accounting 101, there's a difference between revenue and earnings. I want to ask about the way you're funded. I looked at Congress's statute. I'm looking for it here. It says, here's how you're funded. And you just won your lawsuit in the Supreme Court. Each year, beginning on the designated transfer date, in each quarter thereafter, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, where you get your money, shall transfer to your agency from the combined earnings of the Federal Reserve System the amount determined by the director to be reasonably necessary to carry out the authorities of the Bureau. It says the combined earnings, not the revenue. Now, for the longest time, the Federal Reserve was earning money, but that stopped in September of 2022? Now, they are losing money. They don't have any earnings. They're no longer transferring earnings to the general fund. And the Supreme Court based its decision on saying that this funding scheme is constitutional under the Appropriations Clause by saying that these earnings would go to the general fund from the Federal Reserve, so getting them directly from the general fund is no big deal. How are you entitled to any money right now? The Federal Reserve doesn't have any earnings.
Well, we've heard of this theory. I think it's one of the latest ones.
It's not a
that's
theory.
being
It's a
pushed.
congressional
Well,
statute.
I think there's you raised the difference between revenue and net income. There are other places throughout our laws. I can tell you we've looked at this issue. We do believe wholeheartedly everyone is complying with the statute.
I know you believe that, but if you look at
I'm aware with what you said, revenue and net income.
If I could just finish my question.
Sure.
If you read the opinion, and I did, and you read the statute, it says here, bigger than Dallas, you can only get your money from the Federal Reserve out of earnings. Now, the Federal Reserve has not had any earnings since September of 2022. Isn't that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Sure, it's
From a
correct.
net income
All you
perspective,
have to do is
you're
go-
right,
is go-
but they've
go-
generated lots
go
of
ask
fees
OMB.
and income. And I appreciate what you're saying. I'm happy to discuss this with you, but I think we've looked at this.
My point is, every penny you've gotten under this congressional
I don't think
statute,
Congress wanted
every
the
penny
CFPB to be
that you
suddenly
have gotten, if I could
defunded.
finish my thought.
Sure.
I know you don't like to hear this, but the law is the law. You've been operating illegally.
No, that's not true, sir.
Yes, you have. There have been no earnings. Doesn't this put in jeopardy every one of your rules?
We've heard this
and
theory
every
before,
one
and
of
I'm happy to
and
discuss
every
it.
well, you're going to hear it again because it's the law. We didn't say revenue in the statute. We said earnings. How can you possibly argue that the Federal Reserve has had earnings? They're losing money.
I'm happy to discuss this with you, but we have looked at this theory before.
I know you have, but
Yeah.
I'm over. I'm sorry. Tell me why you're mad at Chase Bank.
You're not that sorry, Senator
Who?
Kennedy, but go ahead.
You're mad at PayPal and Chase Bank. Can you tell me real quickly before Sharon cuts me off why you're mad
I
now
think
at PayPal and Chase
the
Bank?
concern is that we have seen an incident at PayPal where there was an attempt to censor people based on their speech. We've also seen that those companies are now going to be offering reportedly advertising based on your individual transaction data. I feel some of this is something we all need to figure out
Are
together.
you going to punish every company that has censored people's speech?
No, I do think.
I applaud that part.
Oh, I think
But do
censorship
you have
is
to
a big
approve-
problem.
Senator Kennedy,
You have to
time's
approve the
expired.
speech
Senator,
first?
No, I
time's
think we should.
expired.
I think we're on the same page.
I'm over. I'm sorry. Thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
You're not sorry, and I wasn't indulging you, but thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Warren,
Well,
recognized.
I'm sorry as I could be. I will send you later
Senator
a
Warner, Virginia.
fruit basket to make up for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, the meeting with Speaker Johnson. Later today, Senate Republicans will meet with Speaker Mike Johnson to lay out, as has been described, the, quote, large-scale and, quote, far-reaching agenda Republicans plan for America should they regain control of government. I'll spoil the ending right now. If there's one thing Republicans absolutely love to do in Congress, it's passing tax giveaways for the very wealthy. That's what they plan on talking about today, using reconciliation to gut as much of the Democrats' middle-class agenda as possible while passing another round of costly tax breaks that cater to wealthy elites. I understand that nowadays it's tempting to think about elections just in terms of personalities, but that is a grave mistake. Look at the agendas. Look at what Republicans say they want to do. Republicans say their biggest priority, their North Star, is undoing all the things President Biden and we Democrats have passed these past few years, while recycling the same Trump tax cuts that proved to be a dud 7 years ago. Remember 2018? They couldn't even run on these things because Democrats had made a strong message that these weren't tax cuts for the middle class, these were tax cuts to benefit the very, very wealthy. So they're not going to be able to sustain this argument, but their right-wing ideologues push them in a direction that many of them probably know is wrong. It also means if they want to repeal everything the Democrats did, it means repealing a $35 a month insulin for people on Medicare. That's what Republicans want. It means stopping Medicare from negotiating the price of prescription drugs. That's what Republicans want, too. It's also, by the way, what Big Pharma wants. It means cutting programs that feed kids during summer breaks, that feed seniors like Meals on Wheels, that fight congestion on our streets and pollution in our air. To Republicans, these things are like their version of greatest hits. It means cutting all the clean energy investments we've passed that create good-paying jobs and protect our environments. Republicans are in the pocket of big oil, which will always oppose efforts to grow clean energy. And remember what Donald Trump said to oil executives recently at Mar-a-Lago. If they back him, he will do as much as possible to repeal our climate agenda starting on day one. So anyone who cares about the climate and sees the changing weather and the tornadoes and the hurricanes and all the bad weather, the cold wave and the cold waves and the heat waves, well, Our Republican friends want to undo the great progress we made in the IRA, and will try to do it in reconciliation. And that's a real threat. I know Republicans writhe in pain. Finally, it also means, as much as Republicans try to avoid saying it, putting vital programs like Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block and telling seniors that the Social Security retirement age is going to go up. I know Republicans writhe in pain whenever people bring this up, but look at the platform released by the Republican Study Committee, which covers over 180 House members. And let's not forget, if they keep control of the House, which I hope they won't, don't believe they won't, they're going to set the agenda, and then Senate Republicans, even those who know better, will just blindly follow. And they, in the House study, in the Republican Study Committee, 180 of the 220 some odd Republicans endorsed not only a national abortion ban, but cuts for Social Security and Medicare. So that's what they're going to do. And who here remembers the campaign platform that our colleague from Florida released back in 2022? He's now running for leader over here. He thought it was a good idea for Republicans to run on tax hikes for the middle class while putting programs like Social Security and Medicare at risk. What a shock. This message didn't work with the American people. I don't think they're working with the voters of Florida either. And speaking of tax cuts, let me add this. According to the Washington Post, Republicans not only plan to do another round of Trump's tax cuts for the very rich, they want to go even further. They want even lower rates for corporations. They want even lower rates for those making over $1 billion a year, while making it easier for tax cheats to get away without paying their fair share. Donald Trump's message to donors has reportedly been pretty simple. Support me, I'll get you a sweet tax deal in return. Republicans love to claim that they're party of fiscal responsibility, but that goes out the window whenever they start salivating over the thought of deep tax cuts for the high-end people in America. The CBO has pointed out that extending the Trump tax cut alone would add a whopping $4.5 trillion to the deficit. So, you want to cut spending when it comes to feeding kids or educating kids or helping kids pay for college? You want to cut the deficit, rather, when you want, and that's your way of cutting the deficit? By cutting money to feed kids or educate kids, avoid the high cost of college? But the deficit doesn't matter when it means tax cuts for the very, very wealthy. It's utterly callous. When it comes to funding things like nutrition or health care for kids, they scream and holler that we can't add to the deficit. But when it comes to sweeping tax cuts for the ultra-rich, suddenly the deficit doesn't matter. The old cliche says that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Republicans today have been totally transformed by the cult of personality of Donald Trump. But if they're given control of government, they'll continue to give middle-class Americans the same raw deal Republicans have pushed for years: tax giveaways for the ultra-rich and crumbs for everyone else. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.